John, glad to have you with us. MALDEF does such amazing work. What do you think MALDEF's priorities are for the upcoming cycle?
Well, clearly, the issues that are facing the Latino community, whether we're newcomers or natives, or whether we've been here for one generation or many, many more, immigration is the issue that will define the future for the Latino community in the nation. Second to that is education and civil rights. As we look to November, we will be making, along with a number of groups, making a priority on election protection, both when students come back to school in September to make sure that they know they can vote in their campus as well as at home. And second is around the registration deadline. October 2nd is around the time of the day of the registration deadline. In this regard, we have been litigating against voter ID laws. We had a brief at the U.S. Supreme Court, and we just had a week-long trial against the Arizona law, and that one we did not prevail at the district court. But we need to make sure that all citizens can register, and once registered, that they can vote. So MALDEF and a number of organizations will be doing work on election protection. If we need to keep open the polls later than 8 o'clock on election day, because people are lined up to vote, then we will go into court to do that. If people are being intimidated because they're not fully proficient in English, we will protect their right to vote as well.
So yeah, I had heard about the Arizona case. They have, the conservatives seem to have a very concerted effort to really push voter ID, to push proof of citizenship at different state levels, and also then to bring it up to the federal level. Because they have this meta-narrative, right, that it's kind of like you're presumed guilty, because there's this implicit test, a test of citizenship, a test of, your right to vote. And I believe that they're trying to take that right to vote away. How are you guys trying to counter the concerted efforts in the states and at the federal level?
Well, we work in coalition with a lot of organizations that strongly believe that the right to vote belongs to all citizens, so that the state measures that have come up really interfere with that right. It's not a question of allowing non-citizens to vote or allowing people who are underage to vote. The fact is that there's very, very little record of any kind of non-citizen voting. It's hard enough for U.S. citizens to come out and vote, let alone to think that either non-citizens will register to vote or that undocumented immigrants will announce to the government, here's where I live and I'm going to be around in November, so come and get me. That doesn't happen. So we work with organizations that respect the right to vote, to protect it and also to enhance it.
In terms of the immigrant rights movement, where do you see immigration policy? How do you see it shaping up in the new administration, assuming we get a friendly president?
Well, we don't have a new administration yet. And MALDEF, like the other organizations in the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, it's a nonpartisan organization. We don't endorse candidates, but we expect the candidates to endorse the principles and values of the Latino community. After all, whether the path to the presidency starts in Chicago or starts in Arizona, it's going to go through Nevada, New Mexico, Florida, Colorado states where Latinos live and will be the decisive vote. So when we look at the two platforms, now the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda, which MALDEF chairs, had the opportunity to present testimony to the platform committee of the Democratic National Committee. And so far, the platform that was passed by the Democrats here on Monday night has about 26 elements in it that are consistent with where the National Hispanic Leadership Agenda stands. On the Republican side, we've just heard today that there is an internal battle within the party, and the first winners in that are those who want to take immigration back to where we've been the last 8 years. A directionless policy, enforcement only, trying to deport everybody who doesn't have status. And it's even a repudiation of Senator McCain's work with Senator Kennedy on immigration. So that is one where there's no mistake about where the parties stand on these issues.
Do you anticipate, when a bill comes up again, do you think it would be the first term or the second term? And then also, do you think it would still include the employer points-based system, or is that something that MALDEF isn't really looking to pursue that particular aspect?
Well, we expect that the next administration will have as one of its year one priorities immigration reform. It should be comprehensive reform that does deal with employment-based immigration as well as family reunification and providing a pathway to legalization for those of the 12 million people who are law-abiding citizens except for the citizen part. They pay their taxes, they work, they have clean police records. Beyond that, enforcement is part of the immigration law, and we, as lawyers in particular, expect that to be part of our laws. Every nation has the right to establish who comes and who goes in their country. And once you have those laws, there's an inherent responsibility to enforce all those laws. Right now, the laws don't reflect the nation's needs. Beyond that, whether the President and Congress can get together in the first year, there are 4 things that the next president can do, and we want them to do immediately upon getting into office that doesn't take the consent or the cooperation of Congress. One is that the current policies of the Immigration Service are that they can pick up anybody they want while they are looking for an individual person. And they often pick up more people by accident than by design. That is a strategy that is not necessarily required by law, and we would expect that because of the great fears that are being engendered by that policy in the community, that Immigration Service ought to go after people who have final orders of deportation, perhaps are in jail because they've committed a U.S. crime. After they've served their time, they can have a deportation hearing. Second is that this administration has increased the ability of state and local governments to enforce the immigration laws. The next president must put a stop to that in order to ensure that there are civil rights protections in place. And right now there is no checking about whether the civil rights of not only undocumented immigrants, it's not as if unauthorized immigrants have no rights, but the rights of citizens and permanent residents who are in our communities and other communities are being violated right now. The next president must put a stop to that and send in the Civil Rights Division to make sure they know what those local police departments are doing. Now, most police departments don't want to do this local federal immigration law enforcement because they see it very clearly. It's a barrier to their job to serve and protect their own communities. Third, we need the next president to have a head of the Department of Homeland Security who will do what the head of immigration did in 1980, 1990, and 2000, but what Secretary Chertoff has refused to do. And that is to coincide their policies and their strategies with that of Census Bureau. And what I mean by that is not coordinate, but to have them separate. And what we need to do, what Secretary Chertoff hasn't done, is to say the Census Bureau has an essential national obligation and role to play at the beginning of 2010, which is to make sure every individual in the United States is counted. Previous heads of immigration have said they're not going to do neighborhood raids during the time that the census enumerators are out. We need to have that policy by the next administration. And finally, the next president, with the Secretary of State and the ambassadors to our Latin American countries and other sending countries of immigrants, must work more on a cooperational basis rather than confrontational, and come up with policies that don't just focus at the border, but focus at the sending economies to allow people to be able to stay home in their home countries to work and be with their families.
One last question, just really briefly. When you were talking about the community, because the police officers don't want to be doing it, I think a lot of them would rather do community policing, and it's also placing a huge burden on the state and local governments. And a lot of the elected officials, they're not getting reimbursed by the federal government.
That's correct, that's correct. And when the inevitable civil rights violations occur, the Justice Department lawyers and the Justice Department is nowhere near to be found when groups like MALDEF sue local government police departments. So it's a policy that they take on freely, but they also, when it comes time to either defend their policies in court or to pay the fine or the judgment, the federal government is nowhere in sight. It is another example where the current system is broken, and the local governments have more important and more essential things to do to make sure that local communities are safe. The federal immigration law enforcement role for them, which makes all of us less safe.
Thank you so much, John.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the work. See you soon, Cody.
Thank you.